thoughts on, the preparations as you see them that Xi has put into place for a shooting war?
Well, yeah, Frank, I think it was inevitable that sooner or later, Gordon has outlined it brilliantly, what has been going on. It is going on inside the top levels of the Central Military Commission and the Chinese Communist Party. It was inevitable that somebody like General Zhang would step up when you see all of your predecessors being disappeared. Sooner or later, a group is going to come together that is going to put their foot down. Now, Gordon has outlined essentially 3, maybe 4 options of what is really going on. I don't think General Zhang and his group would want to disappear totally Xi Jinping. But I think they want to still demonstrate a certain amount of stability, but definitely dissatisfaction with Xi and what's going on. And so I think this is a more graceful way to assert control rather than an abrupt change, which would be catastrophic and could set off all kinds of things inside. I don't think this slows down what I call essentially the world on fire and the advancement to the final kinetic phase with China versus the United States. I don't think that necessarily stops that, but I think it does change the dynamic. And I think also one thing that has led to this is not just the disappearances of all the military leadership that Xi has carried out, but I think it's also an honest, frank assessment of the no limits agreement originally with Russia, but you have to also include Iran, North Korea, Venezuela, South Africa, and even Pakistan, is what is the return on investment for China been so far? Well, let's look at it. The first step of the no limits agreement was for Russia to take Ukraine in 72 hours, and 3.5 years later, here we are. So Russia has made some advances, but has also achieved horrific losses. And now you have North Koreans on the battlefield. You even have Chinese being identified on the battlefield, very concerning. But you also have Russia would not be in the game if it wasn't for massive war material support really, really coming from China, even though China blames North Korea or blames Iran. All the machine tools come from China, but this is a China-directed war material support. Now you have Iran greatly degraded. So now the war material from Iran is now in question. So I think that's in the assessment, in the frank assessment of the Chinese senior military leaders. It's not only their own hides that they are concerned about. It's like, what have we gotten out of this so far? Again, that doesn't say that they're not moving forward toward a final kinetic showdown with America. I think all other indicators are a go on this, but they want to handle it differently. And frankly, the no limits agreement, the hard return on investment is questionable with Russia enfeebled, with Iran now severely degraded. Now they've taken, and Gordon and I and Grant have covered the situation in South Korea. A good event is now occurring with the civil gatherings inside of South Korea, questioning the outcome of the June 3rd election, which was definitely a steal, led by Wang Huning, and they are actually now actively announcing his name in South Korea, which has now elicited a response from the corrupt South Korean media, very closely controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. A good turn of events. Name and shame, that's always the best strategy. And now that name has been announced as essentially the Chinese quarterback of the steal, I think it's changing the dynamic a bit inside of South Korea. So they pulled a fast one on us while we were focused on Taiwan. They stole the South Korean election, but at the same time, so that's our right flank of the first island chain. You have to look at South Korea and Japan as our right flank of the first island chain when facing China. But at the same time, the reverse is true. Now, China has potentially lost their left flank when facing the Middle East and Europe with the essentially the catastrophic losses that Iran has incurred when faced with Israel and now some American strikes. So now Iran is in question, and they're conducting essentially a mini Berlin airlift to try to stabilize. We don't know what's going in, and Gordon has pointed that out. We don't know what's going in on these oftentimes 747s. Interesting choice of aircraft. You could get them relatively cheap on the international market, low mileage, good condition, and we don't know how many China has. They're flying in a lot of stuff. They're actually also bringing out a lot of their advisors. They have an extremely large footprint of advisors in Iran. So they're conducting a mini Berlin airlift to try and stabilize, support, and evacuate personnel from Iran. And Iran totally collapses. That's 25%. At a minimum, 25% of China's energy off the table. Huge loss, compounding all the other pressures. And China's trying to establish an iron triangle of both pipelines and also rail infrastructure between China, Iran, and Russia, so they can move goods and products and oil and refined product outside of the choke points that the American Navy, once it gets back up at fighting strength, can pinch off. But I don't think they're going to be able to get this iron triangle of pipelines and rail network in place fast enough. It's going to take years and decades to get this a reliable infrastructure. So immense pressure, and sooner or later, a group of general admirals was going to come together and put their foot down with Xi and says, we're done with this disappearing thing. And I think they've chosen the option not to do an abrupt change, not to necessarily disappear Xi, but clearly they've put they have him under their control. I think that's what's in many ways what's going on, and I don't think that necessarily stops their plans on Taiwan or the final stage of the kinetic showdown, but it does significantly change the dynamic.
John Mills, thank you so much, and again, appreciate you being with us for the time you couldn't be.